for all the match strikers.
This is Spiritual Pyro.
I'm so looking forward to this conversation that we've been kind of circling like in our own friendship as we've just been connecting lately, as we're reading some of the comments and feedback we're getting, which has just again been so fantastic from those that are listening. And who knows? I mean, it's going to be hard to sum up this topic of deconstruction. Big word. in one
not
episode.
Loaded at all. Not loaded at all.
Super neutral. Yeah, definitely. Especially coming from our backgrounds and stories. But I'm looking forward to it. I mean, this is water we've been swimming in, and so many people that we know and love are swimming in and have been swimming in this water too. So it feels like a really important conversation to engage with. And I mean, I always love getting your perspective, especially when it comes to matters of faith.
Same. And I think it's just kind of it's timely, just on the heels of last week's episode, talking about the women we come from and the stories we come from, and what we were handed when we were young, as well as here in midlife, and what we hand each other. And I think that faith is a part of that. Wherever you find yourself on that spectrum, what we were handed when we were young is often such a big part of our origin story. And so it kind of makes sense for us to just jump in. What do you think? Let's just go for it.
Let's go for it. That's kind of our style, if we're honest. We're like, give me the deep end. I'm going in with both feet.
Cannonball, baby. Cannonball. Like, let's just do it. Let's just talk about it. So let's talk about where we come from and what we were handed. And tell me, Sarah, tell the listeners, like, why don't you just kick us off and start off with a little bit of your faith origin stories?
The lore of my faith.
The deep magic. We were there when the deep magic was written.
The deep magic of the 90s Christian purity culture. That's the deep magic I come from. Yeah, so it's kind of funny because I actually didn't grow up in a religious family. We didn't have regular Sundays at church. I was sort of like this anti-rebel because I wanted to go to church.
Ooh, imagine,
I know. But I had always, a lot of my friends attended. It was just a local non-denom church, which can mean many, many things, but non-denominational. And yeah, I had friends that attended and always invited me, being good, what's the right word for that? It's not loaded. Good
all the
friends.
Words are loaded. The words are loaded. Can we just establish that? Can we just establish that everything about this conversation feels really loaded for everybody, whether you're listening, wherever we're coming from, all of these things can feel really loaded. So I would just kind of want to take that off your shoulders, that you don't have to carry that by yourself. I'm with you in that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so I attended weekly. I went to their midweek youth groups, sang all the songs, did all the hangouts, all the silly games. But I loved it. I actually really, really looked forward to those services in that time. And I think I come from a big family, so it wasn't like I was lonely, but I really liked the connection and belonging and community that I would experience when I would be at those services. And so really, it was sort of this slow beginning all through my elementary years, through junior high years, and through high school, where I was baptized junior high, friend's backyard pool. So had do you remember, did you have one of the purity rings, Corinne? Did you have a purity ring?
I did
Oh,
not.
how were you spared? I guess we'll get to your story in a
Yeah.
minute.
Well, I'm just slightly older than you, and I think that there's some, things that, I kind of missed right under the
There's like
wire.
a,
So,
a
yeah.
little gap, like just a few. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fair.
yeah.
Oh yeah, yep. Made the pledge. I kissed dating goodbye.
Woo.
Yeah. I mean, I was all in, baby. So that's just a glimpse at sort of what I was handed. In many ways, is what I was seeking out. Is I went looking for. It wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily given to me through a family member or tradition. I was so hungry. Yeah, I think it
You were
was
all in, baby. You were
all
all
in,
in, baby.
baby. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I sought out. It's what I was handed, I guess, was the theology that existed within that system, but it was a system that I actively sought out, and the belonging that it gave me, the connection, the fun, the ability to, I don't know, if you miss a week, they're going to notice you're not there. It just was like built-in community, and it was just, there was almost like an empty space within me that I didn't realize was there. And this church experience just fulfilled it in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to know how that was for your family. If your family wasn't church going, it really could go either way. They could be like, oh great, I'm so glad you're hanging out with the good rule following kids at church instead of, whatever alternative was available to you at the time. Or they could be like, oh shit, what is she getting into? I mean, families can go either way. So I'm just kind of curious how that was for you.
It was, it was funny because my dad was supportive but nervous. So he'd grown up with a Catholic background, and so grew up very, very intentionally, as soon as he could make decisions for himself, not religious. And so he was supportive, but he was not too keen and eager to get me involved in everything church related. And to the point where when I made the decision later to go to Christian college, his stipulation was, fine, just don't marry a pastor. And I was like, oh my God, I would never marry a pastor, Dad.
What do you mean?
Fast forward, and that's exactly what happened. But yeah. So I mean, it was not a point of tension, but it was definitely understood that was something I was pursuing, and I definitely went through a few years where I was very convinced that it was my job to save my wayward father. I'd wear the cheesy cliche little church shirts with the sayings that talked about not going to hell. Here I am.
A good t-shirt.
Right? I'm like 13, thinking I know everything. I'm going to save him. Yeah. Bless my dad. He really put up with a lot of passive aggressive attempts to save his soul. So thanks for hanging in there, Dad.
And now he's like one of our biggest cheerleaders.
I know. I love him so much. So yeah, but that's that side. And then my mom ended up finding her own path into a religious community as well. And so in a similar way, was supportive. The church that I attended was the same one she did for a while. And then I started going to a couple different ones. I got to the point where I needed double church sometimes. I would go to one service. And
wow.
Yeah, and then drive over to, other church and go again. Yeah, I was diehard.
You were doubling down on this anti-rebellion.
I mean, I was going to win. Whatever the prize was, I didn't even need it. I just just let me win.
Yeah. You were winning. You were literally winning at religion.
So good at religion. I got all the gold stars.
Well, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot available, they're readily available. I love that you, I don't know. I just think that, again, we often joke about being so earnest, it's just like, we tried so hard, literally you were trying so hard, the doubling up and doubling down at the same time.
So many doubles are happening.
Oh, we were so cute.
I know it.
I bet you
know.
were so cute driving across town for that second service.
Oh, so earnest, right? Like just really devoted. Had my Bible with all my notes and scribbles, and my pen and my notebook.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. All in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious. I want to hear about your own experience, what you were handed. And I'm just dying to hear, what little Corey was like and as she was exploring maybe her own faith in those early years.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just like, I had my Precious Moments Bible when I was little, and that I was often running. I was actually I'm always surprised every time we talk about our faith origin stories, just because neither of us were handed the evangelical system that we were a part of when we met. So when I was working at the college and you were attending as a student, like that, neither of us were the kid or the young woman who grew up within that system, right? So many people that you and I know, separately and collectively, so many people were raised with that from a very, very young age within their family, within their histories. And I think that's a unique experience. So for you and I, we kind of came to it on our own a little bit later and apart from our families. So I just think that's an interesting piece. So I was raised Episcopal. So in the Episcopal tradition, we were a part of a small church community across town that was rich with tradition and openness. And it was a very uneventful part of my life. It was just this, it was part of my life, but it was a part as opposed to being everything. And I think that that's a unique difference from tradition to tradition, right? From denominations within different worldviews, that looks different for different people. For me, at a young age, it was one part of my life. And I think I've always kind of been wrestling, and I think there's a part of me that's always been deconstructing at every single point along the way. I've always been asking questions. I've always been unraveling things. I've always been changing my mind and trying something different and, really evaluating what I thought about things even from a young age. And, one of my chapters in Skies that I'm so excited for people to read has to do with me being a young teenager in the Episcopal Church and really pushing back against my family and pushing back against, the what would it be called? The liturgy. That was the norm there. But really, it wasn't until I went to church camp for the first time, and not church camp with my church. I mean, we had like a youth group of like 10 kids, it was like, again, very uneventful. But I went to a church camp that my relatives were familiar with, and it was in California, and it was this giant camp with hundreds of kids my age. And the first time I went, I was like, wait a minute, like believing in God and like church stuff can be fun. And I was like, oh, that's when I was like, I'm in, because I just want to have a good time, right? Like I was at the age where I was like, I didn't want to sit down and stand up and kneel and sit down and stand up and recite. And, that wasn't, I wasn't finding any life in that. So when I went to church camp for the first time, my eyes were opened to this like possibility of fun and friends and good music and cute boys and, the mountaintop experience, right? That most of us have had at some point in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on, it was like every summer, if I could go to church camp every summer, and I did, I went again and again throughout my junior high and high school years. If I could just go to church camp, like all was right with my world. And so it wasn't really specifically religion I was handed. And it also was not the experience that I was handed. It was something that I kind of got to do on my own. It was my first little bit of independence. And so I had this independent experience and was really exploring like the independence of thought and belief and what I wanted for myself. And I took all that, really looking back, it was very evangelical in terms of theology and perspective. And oh man, I took all that and I placed it squarely on my own shoulders. Like nobody made me believe anything. Nobody ground me down until I accepted, the family faith or anything like that. No, it was just this experience that I wanted again and again and again. And honestly, it became like this high that I was seeking, right? So at that point, my drug of choice was religion. It was that thing that gave me the belonging, the connection, the social outlet, like all the fun, the games, like the soundtrack of my youth was that kind of a rhythm and those kinds of experiences. And I really grew to love that and connect with it so much so that really then, it was started to become identity. So anyway, I think that's interesting because my family had those peripheral experiences as well. But I have always, like you, Sarah, I think we have this in common, like never did anything halfway. It was like if I was going to do this, it was just like I was going head first or cannonball into the deep end. All of life is all for Jesus. Everything about me now is like, I already was a rule follower, so I got that part down, and it was like, I just wanted to chase that feeling.
Yeah.
So I did for a while. Did you ever go to church camp? Did you ever have that kind of like the mountaintop experience that did you ever chase that?
Yeah. There was a church camp that we went to that was a couple hours north of the valley. We would go, the church would go every summer. And same, looked forward to it. It was so fun. And honestly, I look back at the majority of that experience and I'm like, I feel like I want adult summer camp. Like I want to go to camp. Like totally. It was really so fun. And of course, everything is orchestrated and built around the altar call moment where, kids making these big decisions and declarations about their belief with all of their, handful years of experience of living on this planet. And but I was right there.
And their lack of a prefrontal cortex.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Gosh.
But it is that mountaintop. That is something that religious organizations are very good at delivering on because it does create this emotional connection that, that I think we are hardwired to want. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having that mountaintop experience. And I do think there's something wrong with it being manipulated, but that's a different side of the coin. But as far as us, growing up and being able to have that, it was just so memorable and you get so close to your, fellow campers in that week or whatever it is. And you just have a lot of shared experiences and there's a lot of freedom. It's just such a different environment than your normal day to day. There's so many elements to it that make it memorable and really, really fun. I'm serious about the camp. I think we need to go to like adult summer camp and do all the fun things. Like I want to kayak and hike and, play those games. I don't know, ping pong, whatever. I don't know. Like, come on, summer camp. Come on. We need to make it happen.
Summer. Well, okay. But also like, that's why we've talked about like going to concerts and stuff. And it's like, as a, midlife woman now, when I go to a concert, I'm like, oh, this is actually so much of why I went to church is because of this collective experience. I just didn't know it could exist outside of church, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what I want is I want this, like you and I, we stood with our girls at the Eras tour.
Yes.
I mean, like that moment of, everyone singing and dancing and having this, this, what Brene Brown would, used to talk about, collective joy, that it was like, oh, this is actually just what I was seeking in church, this
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't about a specific belief in God, although it does feel very divine and holy in many ways. It really wasn't about those songs as much as it was about this collective energy and being together. And, for the Eras Tour, also feeling safe, and being around people who are enjoying the same things that you're enjoying. So that connection, like you were speaking to, is what we are wired for. And there's so many ways that we can experience that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know me. I'm like, I actually do want to get women together outside, and whether it's like snowboarding or horseback riding, like you've talked about, like doing those things that we loved so much when we were younger. And it's like, why aren't we all doing that together in midlife, right?
Oh, yeah. So, it makes me think. I saw just the other day, it was a meme, and it said something like, we're not saying, do you want to hang out anymore? We're saying, do you want to go play? Like, bring back play. Like, do you want to go play? Remember? And I was like, oh, I love that so much. Yes, I want to go play.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do
yeah.
too.
I mean, we've got big dreams.
I feel like that's
plans.
I feel like that's gonna be another conversation.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm curious, as you were sharing some of your faith origin story, your lore. I'm curious what your actual, how much God was, and like seeking God was a piece of the church, experience. Like, of all the different ways you could have fun, of all the different ways you could have sought out kind of those mountaintop experiences, to choose church. I'm just curious, like, was that a part of the faith story for you, or was it not at that point?
Yeah. So I think what's interesting is that where I grew up, I had a large circle of friends where everything revolved around religion. So I had a, kind of that close concentric circle of friends that were all different versions and iterations of Christian traditions. And I'm literally still friends with all of them today. So
Wow.
Those lasting relationships, even though we weren't always exactly the same in our religious expressions, we kind of had this core connection that really, for some of my friends goes back as far as like third grade. And that was always true. And then we were a part of this bigger concentric circle of friends that was heavily LDS and Mormon. So living here in the Valley, in the town that we lived in, that was a really big part of just my social circle. So it wasn't really like always necessarily about specific beliefs in God, as much as like everybody was religious in some way in terms of my social upbringing. But what was interesting is that the older I got, the more I started to realize the differences, and but at the same time, we were all just having a good time. Everybody was just having fun. Everybody was doing everything together. There didn't always feel like big separations. And that was sometimes part of the conversation and a lot of times not. And, in many ways, it didn't matter. It wasn't until later on for me in high school where, okay, I'm going to tell you a story.
Okay. Oh, yes. My favorite. I'm leaning in.
So I went on a date with this boy who was LDS. And at that time, I didn't know him very well. But it was like a fun summer date. And, we had worked together and, it was super casual, no big deal. So we go to his house to stop by to grab something on our way out on the state that we were going to go on. And I remember standing in his kitchen. We were literally at his house for like 10 minutes. I remember standing in his kitchen and his dad walked in, and his dad kind of looked me up and down and he goes, "Oh, what ward are you in?" And you not being Mormon, I said, "Oh, and that was no big deal." I had a million parents ask me, things, assuming that I was part of the Mormon church, and I was just always Mormon adjacent. So anyway, he's like, "Oh, what ward are you in?" And I said, "Oh, I'm not Mormon." And he looks at his son and he chuckles and he goes, "Huh, well, you can take that one home." And I was like standing there like a deer in the headlights. Like I had been in that situation a million times. I had never had somebody's parent basically say that I needed to go home, that I was out. That was a who's in, who's out moment for me. And I was, by no means did I think everybody's parents were like that. I had never had that experience in all my years of having Mormon friends and having, dated Mormon boys. That was never a part of my experience. But as a young woman in that moment, I was like, oh, we can all have a good time, but at the end of the day, it's who's in and who's out.
Wow.
And that was like this moment of like clarity for me that was like really jarring. And the kid, oh, bless his heart. I mean, how awkward would that be, right? He was so apologetic and like really awkwardly like actually took me home.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
But in my mind, I was like, whew, like I just dodged a bullet, right? But like actually that became something that was tremendously formative for me, because I was never believing in God because I was afraid of hell, or because I was afraid that God wouldn't love me if I, didn't believe X, Y, and Z. I was always just more curious about what was true about the world. I was always more like, well, what's true about the world? And so I would try something on for size and feel like, no, that doesn't feel like what's true about the world. And I would try this over here and I would try that over there. So I was always wrestling, always evaluating, always asking questions. And I knew that I didn't, believe the same things that my Mormon friends believed. But I didn't ever think that it was going to be such a dividing factor. So the reason I tell that story is because later on in life, as I started unraveling my own faith systems and really allowing myself to set down everything I thought I knew for sure and put everything back on the table and give myself permission to examine it, I was starting to realize that maybe the faith systems that I had been a part of weren't that different from that moment where that kid's dad was like, well, she's out, where I was like, a lot of the experiences that I've had and a lot of experiences that people I know have had have made me think that maybe our faith systems aren't all that different. Maybe there's a lot more in common than I would have once thought. So, that is kind of like a tie from one of my younger an experience that I had during my younger years to, fast forwarding way forward to how I began to think about my own faith systems and the ideas of who's in and who's out. And that really kind of started that ball rolling for me. But I think in those younger years, having taken so much of that and placed it squarely on my own shoulders, that was the beginning stages of me just really walking down every path I could think of to figure out what was true about the world.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't know. Did you grow up, or with the faith that you had taken on yourself? Did you grow up with a sense of a fear of hell or a fear of disappointing God, or what was really the driving factor for you in what you did or didn't believe?
I think in some ways it's similar to what you've described. I think I was just the kid who always kind of had her head in the clouds, was always dreamy, was always feeling, I think it was just always a very spiritual I've been always a very spiritual person. So the idea of there being something bigger than myself was
Mm.
not a leap. It was sort of like I think I came into the world assuming that, even though I didn't have language for it at the time. It just was,
Mhm.
it didn't feel difficult to accept the possibility. It felt really true. But I didn't have any handles for that or any language for that or any boxes for that. And that is what church gave me. They handed me some boxes and they said, this is
Ooh.
what God is. That thing that you're connected to, it's God. The way to get to God is through Jesus. And
Yeah.
you're either in or you're out. And I didn't have a reason to question it. It's like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. This God, the way that Jesus lived, what I'm learning, that all feels like, okay, all right, and it really just felt like, I think if I sometimes wonder, if I had been handed a different box with a different religious
Oh.
label, would that
Mhm.
have made just as much sense to me, and I would have moved forward in that religion or in that
Yeah.
denomination or in that whatever, that belief system. I really, it didn't, it wasn't that I was out looking for explanation.
Mhm.
Never really been hungry to like understand God. I think it was more uh, the experience of someone saying, "Oh, that thing that you feel, or that that gut sense you have, that's the Holy Spirit." That they gave me names and labels
Yeah.
for the way I was already walking through the world. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh. Yes, and it's like, of course, like, that is you to a T, and the idea of the box being handed to you, like, that's such powerful imagery for something that you already knew or something that you already felt inside that you just didn't have language for. I think about my quest to kind of figure out what was true about the world, and within the Christian tradition, it's like, well, here's what's true. This is the only thing that's true, right? Like, and it's like
Hmm.
true, with a capital T kind of thing. And that certainty was so reassuring to me that, like, oh, well, there is something that's true. And I think that looking for that, that's the box I was looking for. I wanted somebody to hand me the box labeled true.
Hmm.
So then I could relax. Cause I just, whatever was true, whatever was right, I just wanted to be on that path. So then, like, once you found it, it was like, oh, whew, okay, good. Well, check, that's done. At least I know I'm on the right path, And so there was the romantic notion of certainty uh, was something that I felt so much reassurance in, but then I quickly developed a death grip on certainty.
Oof.
Like,
Oof.
and once I felt like I had it, like, I did not wanna let it go. I would wrestle it to the ground and find some way, shape, or form to make it fit. It was gonna fit. It was like my job to figure out how to make it fit. And so once I felt like I had that level of certainty, whew, prying it out of my own hands was and loosening that death grip and holding it loosely enough to be able to be intellectually honest and tell myself the truth about my own life. Like, that was the hard part. Nobody else was trying to wrestle it from me. I was the one that had to pry my fingers off of that certainty that I had fallen in love with.
Fallen in love with the certainty. Wow.
Whew.
Yeah, that's a lot. Like, I just want to sit in that for a minute, because I think there's so many layers to that, and in the similar way that very honest and earnest desire for
Mhm.
truth, just show me,
Mhm.
tell me what's true. Show me what's true.
Yeah.
And you were handed a box that said this is true, and why question it, right? Why question the
Mhm.
box, right? Within the
Right.
box that there's, this is, this is a certain thing. It's almost like, okay, well, check, got that. I'm on the right
Yeah.
path, like you said. And um, it's interesting to me as I was thinking kind of about the faith I was handed,
Mm.
is if I go like if I stretch out a timeline of my faith and I go, okay, here's when I first started getting curious. And what is this? Oh, here's the box. It's God. Okay, here's the religion. It's this. Like, as I look at my growth over the years as a person, and if we just, let's just like put a stop at like graduating high school. Okay, just those early first 18 years of life.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
that, how much, in some ways, how much smaller my like social network connection community world, uh perception, understanding, how much of my own like my framework for the way I viewed my life, not just when I would attend a service on a Sunday or a midweek or whatever, but like it the way that the belief system infiltrated everything about my life and the way I
Mhm.
interacted with it, the more involved I became in the church I was a part of over the years. So like the more involvement compounded by the amount of
Mhm.
time as I was growing. And really those are very developmental years. Those are years you
Yeah.
are building who you are. You're also building your understanding of the world and your place in it. And so
Mhm.
to have spent those years of my life within a system that consistently told me what to think, what to believe, what to
Mm.
feel, how to look, how to be,
Mhm.
and really that sense, as you were talking about, you know, the experience you had with the boy that you were seeing, is the exclusivity of the church. You know, it was like us versus them. The communication
Mhm.
was almost like there's something wrong with these people that aren't a part of this community, that you have to
Mhm.
go save them or fix them or educate them, and that was the loving thing to do. That was the work
Yeah.
to do. And it
Yep.
was all, the messaging was so much of the messaging, at least in my experience, was, you know, invite them to church, like get your
Mhm.
people here to us. And
Mhm.
rather than there being a messaging of, hey, bring what you have here to your people, even, you know, it was just very, it became the center of so much of my life over the years that after a while, you may think we stop questioning, almost like we don't know how far we've come from ourselves, how separated from ourselves we've become, in exchange for belonging and community. And really, with every belief that we're doing the right thing, we're
Yeah.
helping, we're saving, literally, we're
Oh.
saving souls. Is there anything more noble than that? Right? So we had like the motivation, we had the inspiration,
Mhm.
and we had the handbook, which was
Yeah.
the Bible. Here you go.
I think about the desire, the obsession with certainty and the desire to be right. And the unfortunate part about that is that within a system that tells you that you're the one who's right and everyone else is wrong, also then comes with a mandate to convince everyone else of what you think you're right about. So whether it's the benevolent tone of saving souls or whether it's an academic pursuit of convincing someone of your point of view, um, the saviorism is something that that was in the box. That was one of the boxes that we both were handed and then grew so weary carrying. But I think that, whether you believe that you're saving a lost soul or whether you believe that you're convincing someone, of your right way of thinking, those are dangerous waters that we were taught to swim in from a very young age.
That's well said.
And I think that has been, I'll speak for myself, that has been one of the heaviest threads of unraveling that I had to untangle, was how long I had spent thinking that I was right and other people were wrong. So much to the surprise of, what people close to me or people that, I hadn't talked to in years, like being able to grow so incredibly comfortable with the idea of being wrong has been one of the greatest joys of my life.
Oh, okay. We just need a minute for that. We need to hold that one for a second. Wow. Yeah.
Like understanding that I could be totally wrong, and being so genuinely okay with that is so 180 degrees opposite of how I lived most of my life within faith systems. Yep, I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong. And I have never felt more free.
Yeah. Well, it's
than coming to terms with that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the stakes aren't as high, right? Like your eternal soul and salvation isn't on the line in the same way, and that forces you in a sense to, you have to be right. There's so much at stake. You have to be right. This is the path you chose. You didn't choose wrong. Versus taking all of that pressure, all that weight that you'd said, placing it on your shoulders, taking it off, and not needing to be responsible for being right about everything all the time, in the same way as accepting not needing to be responsible for convincing everyone to think and believe the same way you do.
Yeah.
Which I that points the needle toward the greater conversation of, deconstruction, and really, if we plant our 18-year-old selves and look at the rest of the map stretching out beyond, I think that's where a lot of that conversation is swirling for us, and definitely waters we're going to keep dipping our toes in.
Absolutely. I think we've got some really beautiful stories to share, and as well as, like you said, stretching out the map. And I think that there's intention in that, because the more life we live, the more we realize the less we know, and the further we go and the more we experience, it's all formative. It all shapes and reshapes and helps us unravel and rethread. So I don't know. I kind of think that's where we're going in this next part of the conversation.
Yeah, this might have to be a two-parter.
I think so. Let's come back. Let's come back and get into that.
Let's do it.
That's my motto. If it's not fun, I don't want to do it.
The 1C Story Network, for the love of stories.